Hello, and thanks for tuning in to Blockchain Gamer.biz's weekly news roundup. Today is Friday, the 19th of April. I'm your host, Jenny Jordan, and with me is co-host John Jordan. Hi, John.
Hello.
Before we start, just make sure you check out our website, blockchaingamer.biz. Follow us on our socials, our XBCGBiz, and on LinkedIn. So there's been a lot of token movement this week, which I'm sure we will look at in some depth. You can clearly sort of say that the tide has changed again from sort of first quarter of 2024, where it was basically all an upward track. Yep. So what could sort of explain those kind of volatility now in token land? Right, Yuga Labs announced that Faraway Games and Yuga Labs announced that Faraway is acquiring Yuga Labs IPs, Legends of the Mara and the Heavy Metal NFT collection. Obviously, they have had a strategic partnership between each other prior to that as well on other games. So maybe you can talk us through a bit more of that, because you've been playing Serum City quite a bit, and how does that sort of relate to the Yuga IP. Ronin released some big news this week with kind of Web2 game IP Ragnarok, and they're bringing their universe to the Ronin blockchain. So not only is that sort of they're coming to Ronin, but they're going into Web3. So that was sort of big news in the space in general. Avalon, the game, there's actually two games, isn't it? So it's called Avalon, so it's a little bit confusing. We have covered the other Avalon as well on the website not too long ago, but this is the sort of the big metaverse sort of project Avalon. Maybe you can explain a little bit more about that, John. They announced a 10 million funding round this week. And Pixels has reached a new milestone in, I think, I don't know how many of the blockchain games out there actually have this sort of VIP system, but they have now reached, let me get this right, 200,000 VIP members, meaning sort of recurrent players in that game, which is about $10 a month.
$10 a month, yeah.
Generate about 2 million a month, which isn't bad for a team of 15 people, or whatever, scrappy little team. Luke Babikowski called them the other week. Right, and you've been talking to the Sandbox team. Indeed. We've not been talking to Splinterland, even though it's still one of my favorite games out there. Still trying sort of to hold on to it. Although Pirate Nation is like a strong contender at the moment. Anyway, let's kick off.
I don't think there are any Pirate Nation hats. I'm not seeing any Pirate Nation hats.
If there are, send them my way, please.
Pirate Nation hats.
Send them my way. Yeah.
No, I'm just looking, and your Splinterland hat looks much better than my Sandbox hat. I think my Sandbox hat is good. My Sandbox hat isn't an official one, but your Splinterlands hat is an official one. But we ordered it ages ago. It took about 4 months to turn up, which is why you're wearing it. And there's no special significance with Splinterlands this week, but it just turned up, so that's a good one. But
that's right.
Yeah, there we go. Where should we start then?
Well, they're just like generally, Splinterland isn't the sort of team anyway that does these sort of big announcements. They're not sort of in that kind of Web3 spirit of going like first teasing news for about 3 weeks, or something big is coming, and then it comes and it's so they're much more building in the silence, even releasing quite major things in the silence, and just sort of very community oriented in that way. Anyway. Tokens, John, talk us through what's happened. Which ones are performing well and why, and which ones are performing not so well?
Yeah, so as you say, it's so we put out our big blockchain gaming report at the start of April, looking at the first 3 months of the year, and pretty much everything was up because that's just how crypto was. Although even at the end of that, it was starting to sort of come off a little bit. But in the last 2 weeks, we've seen, Bitcoin come down from 70,000. I think it's gone under 60,000. It's sort of back up at 62 at the moment. But a lot more sort of uncertainty, which, there's lots of different reasons. Everyone's got a different reason why that's the case. I guess, Bitcoin halving, people aren't sure about. There's obviously loads of macro stuff going on. There's obviously stuff in the Middle East. Lots of reasons why sort of shares are also come off their highs as well. So general, a bit of uncertainty at the moment. But I do sort of think that when it comes to sort of crypto, when everything's going up, then it's not obviously boring. It's a sort of nice. It's nice. Everyone feels happy, but you don't really get an idea of which who's doing better compared to other people, because obviously just everything's going up, and it's very random. When not everything's going up, you start to see some more interesting trends, I think. So what was sort of interesting, which is that sort of the one, it's not the one token, but the one sort of biggish token that's done really well in gaming is the Guild of Guardians token. So that's been up, I think, 300% year on year. And that's purely because the game is coming out on the 15th of May through the App Store. So that's a sort of an obvious sort of signal that people have sort of, that game's been around for like 4 years. It's been, they've made it and then they sort of totally changed it. So it's been sort of made twice. And it's obviously a big deal for Immutable. It's in one of their 2 internal games, and a big deal for Immutable's ZK EVM. So not the first game launching on it, but one of the first. So I think there's an obvious sort of signalling around that's driven price up. And I guess the other interesting thing is we've generally I think tokens around games are sort of doing a bit better than we saw a lot of tokens that wasn't really clear what the underlying utility was. So I guess the obvious example is something like Portal, which was sort of like a meme coin. It was sort of like no one exactly knew who it was from. There was like lots of shilling on Twitter, and it sort of launched, and some people made a lot of money, but then it's just, what's the point of it, sort of thing, and that sort of gone down quite a lot. There's a few other ones like that that's not really clear. They were sort of taking advantage of the sort of positive opportunity and sort of launching, and then sort of then after people have got their free money, if there's no reason why you would have it, then why would you keep it? Everyone just sells it. So there's quite a lot of that sort of stuff going on. But pretty much everything has sort of gone. So the interesting thing is when we looked at the sort of top, I generally look at the sort of games in the top 300 sort of crypto. So if you ranked all 300 crypto, obviously Bitcoin number 1, Ethereum number 2, and games were in there. They're sort of the ones I look at, and really there were some still up. So Prime was a really good example. So that's sort of that's the Parallels coin, and that's sort of related to, they got this AI game coming out called Colony, although that's not till next year. So that one's done really well. YGG's done really well because it launched on Ronin. A few other ones are still up, but Immutable had gone down. That was that's the biggest single token by market cap. So that had come down sort of quite a bit actually. So maybe people looking at sell off some IMX and buy some Gods Unchained. I mean, they're obviously both in the same ecosystem, so you can sort of imagine that sort of stuff happening. But I think it is interesting when stuff, you get a sort of rebalancing when not everything's going up. So the next sort of couple of weeks, interesting to see sort of what rebounds, because I think every time you get more data in the space, then people are going, I've got more data, this one's doing better than that one, so I'll come out of that one and buy this one. So you sort of get a shuffling of the pack. And hopefully over time, what we hope is the better quality projects where people are playing the game and using the tokens. And it's sort of, it's interesting that Pixels, as you mentioned, so there's the social RPG running on Ronin. So that's, the biggest blockchain game by, quite a long way, most popular. It's generating now, $2 million. People are spending $2 million of its Pixel token to get this VIP monthly membership. But the actual Pixel token is actually sort of down on when it launched. So that's sort of like that seems a bit weird. And partly because that token is, people don't think it's going to 10x because sort of that, that game is already quite big. But equally, you kind of go, well, why would you, this, again, the biggest blockchain game out there that's generating revenue and the token's gone down, that is not investment advice clearly to other people, but that, in some ways that clearly doesn't make sense when people just go, I'll buy this sort of meme coin thing that doesn't mean anything but might go up. So I think hopefully over time you sort of see a rebalancing around, you expect hopefully that projects with lots of people using a coin, then at least that's that's how tokens are designed to be useful. So that would sort of be.
Well, it's hard for us to understand. It was even hard for some developers. I know you've been speaking to some this week. They kind of can't really understand what's happening to their own tokens, sort of thing, and all the movements.
Yeah, and this is sort of one of the problems with tokens. And well, once you launch a token, you basically have given up control. You give up control of a lot of, you still have the narrative. You can still talk around, what this token's for, and you can say, well, you can think in your head, in a month's time we're going to release this thing, or we're going to do this collaboration, or so you sort of have some sort of narrative around the news. But yeah, it's funny talking to people who launch tokens. It's sort of like, it's a real pain. You have to deal with all the legal stuff. You have to basically pay to get on exchanges. You have to deal with all these. Now is the big thing with all these sort of degen, sort of angel investors, the KOLs, and some of them are quite professional. Some of them are not very professional. Some of them are quite demanding. They always want more. You're to a degree, you're sort of beholden to them, because you're sort of you're looking for them to talk about your project on their sort of socials. But equally, there's no legal agreement. They could just sort of slam. They could be telling all their millions of users that you're rubbish. So and even then, when the price goes up or down, people are sort of looking around. Why, and everyone has sort of an idea why they think but it's not, it's a sort of correlation causation thing. No one really knows. So it's a very dangerous time, really. And I think, the interesting thing for the next few months is there's still a lot. I mean, I've heard sort of, talk of like 50 game projects with wanting to release tokens. And some people have said, we're going to release our token in June. Well, we just don't know what the situation will be like in June. It might be back to, Bitcoin at all-time highs again, or it might be Bitcoin's down to 40,000, 30,000. I mean, who knows? So that's the sort of, it's a very uncertain sort of time. And I think if I hadn't launched my token now, I would sort of be carefully thinking about whether I wanted to do it. One, because there's so many other tokens out there. And two, really, I still think even now a lot of projects are not very focused on, why you actually need a token,
Yeah. And on that note, actually, we've got a great Mavens feature coming up next week, which discusses exactly this topic. And there are plenty of very sort of insightful, kind of more cautious advice that when you listen to the actual sort of experts and leaders in the industry, who knows a little bit more what they're talking about. So absolutely, you're well aligned with those. But interesting was that Ronin's, Sky Mavis's Ron token flipped the Axie token this week, which is something that you've been sort of always said this is bound to happen, because Ron is the blockchain and Axie is the game running on the blockchain. So at some point it's going to happen. We didn't quite expect it to happen due to sort of actually falling, Ron falling as well, but actually falling quicker sort of thing. So
well, the other funny thing now is they flip back again. So
have they? Oh,
yeah.
Okay,
no,
funny.
So it is one of those things where I mean, it sort of, in a sense, it sort of shows the some of the other forces in the market. So the AXS token from Axie, that's been around 2021. Did it launch? Something like that. Yeah, it's been around for a long time. So it just means that's got a lot of people have earned that, and you can obviously earn it in playing Axie now. So that just token is very available. Obviously, at one point it was, I don't know, $150 all time high. Now it's down to $7. So it's gone up and come down again. Whereas the Ron token actually has been around for a couple of years as well. And actually, there's quite a lot of that, because you can sort of stake it and all this sort of stuff, get rewarded for it. So, but there is this underlying thing where, the Ron token is basically the gas token for the Ronin blockchain. So you imagine that, that's the underlying technology. So things running on top of the underlying technology, in some logical sense, shouldn't be worth more than the underlying technology. Because if the underlying technology went away, the thing that's running on top of it, what value is that got?
Exactly.
And obviously you have the thing, people, Ethereum is a blockchain, and there's lots of tokens that are worth lots of money on Ethereum, but none of them is bigger than Ethereum. So you sort of think over time, that's the sort of the way it goes. But when you have speculation in there, then it just, I think over time, you would say the Ron token is going to be higher than the AXS token, but maybe somewhat naively, I was just like, in the bull market, obviously the Ron one's going to go up more, but actually, you have to be pragmatic about it and say the Ron token will be more than the AXS token, but that could be because the Ron token's gone down 90% and the Axie token's gone down 90% and the Ron token's gone down 70%, which is not sort of what people imagine in the first place.
Good. Right. I don't know. You've been playing some of Faraway Games, moving on to this topic now, haven't you? So tell us a little bit about that, and if you.
So this is sort of I know Faraway. I've had them on the podcast a couple of times, and I sort of knew them before. So they're a team that's been in games for ages. They did a lot of mobile games. They got bought by a company called Glue Mobile, and they made a bunch of games for them. And then Glue Mobile got bought by EA. They'd also worked for Scopely. So they're a really well-established team who've made a lot of, just solid mobile games that have made, had done probably hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue. Very successful in that regard. So it was interesting when they came to Web3 quite early, 2021. They announced, and they made this game called, Mini Nations Royale. Mini Royale Nations. Is that right?
Yeah. Mini Royale Nations.
Mini Royale Nations. And that was the first game to launch on Solana, proper game to launch on Solana. It's like a web-based shooter. So I played that quite a lot and got some NFTs and that was sort of interesting. And then over time, that game's still live and they're still operating it, but over time they've moved all their games are on Ethereum now, partly because they've had this ongoing thing with Yuga. And I think that partly came about because they were making this game called Serum City, which you mentioned, which I play a lot, which is like a city building game. And that's actually with a company called Mutant Cartel, which is a bunch of NFT holders of the mutant apes. So sort of part of the sort of Yuga Labs Bored Apes ecosystem, but a sort of separate, like a DAO. And so they were making this game. They didn't need permission from Yuga, but they sort of were mates with Yuga, and they sort of made this game. And I think over time, the sort of relationship got closer and closer. As you sort of do, as you sort of say, you look at this sort of stuff, and I think Yuga's whole problem has been massively successful, raised a ton of money, and then realised they weren't very experienced in doing anything. So they announced a lot of games, didn't really have any experience in making games, so started using Faraway as their game sort of dev partner, and then over time that relationship just got closer and closer. So and then Yuga Labs are now sort of realizing that they've sort of acquired all these. Obviously they did the Bored Apes, and then they bought the CryptoPunks, and now they bought the Moonbirds quite fairly recently. They got a whole bunch of all these NFTs, and they're all trying to make games and stuff. So it's just become a bit of a mess, and they got this other side metaverse, which they raised a ton of money for. And it's basically been sort of quite underwhelming. So they're doing some testing, and it's a very complicated project. But people are a bit like, focus on one thing. New CEO's come in, Greg Solana, and he's just like, we've got to focus. So we're getting rid of these, sort of secondary games. So the heavy metal one was sort of, I guess, as a game, it's sort of quite weak, but it sort of created these new robot sort of NFTs, and a lot of people sort of played it. It's sort of a sort of resource idle game, and you had a customized sort of den you were building. So it had some quite nice stuff in there, but it wasn't, no one would have played it apart from it was Yuga. And then actually Legends of the Mara was a bit more interesting, and a bit more sort of focused on the other side, NFTs. So you sort of got, that's how you generated the NFTs in Legends of the Mara. But it just sort of came at a time when no one sort of cared. So I have to admit, I never even played it. So that sort of shows, how people just weren't bothered about it really. So I mean, quite how Faraway can sort of reinvigorate these, I'm not quite sure. So it's setting up some point systems in there, because everyone loves point systems, but and it's going to try and deal with sort of interoperability. But I think, I mean, Faraway are smart guys, so they wouldn't have bought these things without some sort of idea what they're going to do. But I think for me, it's quite tricky. It's quite a long-term project for them to do something with them. And I think, as I say, the heavy metal game is pretty weak. So I could maybe imagine that going away, but those NFTs being used. The Legends of the Mara game is actually sort of a bit more interesting, and there's a resource element to it, and then there's like a sort of PvP deck building sort of turn-based element to it. Again, games is not that game. You know, the game's not going to excite people, but you can sort of think that maybe there's something in there. But the whole thing is they've got these NFTs as well. So I'd imagine they'll maybe be rolling those into other sort of experiences.
Maybe they can build up some hype around kind of Dookie Dash Unclogged.
The other whole thing, of course, is there's this Dookie Dash Unclogged game, which was originally when Yuga announced its sort of partnership with Faraway. Faraway was going to be, or is the dev partner on that one, and that's a mobile game which continues the Dookie Dash game that was a year ago. That was a browser-based game. And that did get a lot of sort of interest. Dookie Dash Unclogged is much more about, it's a mobile game, much more Web 2 onboarding into Web 3. That was in sort of soft launch testing. It's gone very quiet around that. So some people are sort of complaining or saying, is it any good or blah, blah, blah. So there's a bit of uncertainty around that.
People are always complaining in Web 3.
Yeah, there is. So it's not, Faraway is not, I think they're about 100 people, but that's, considering now they've got their own game, they've got this Serum City. They've got these just bought 2 games off Yuga. They've got this co-dev deal with Unclogged. That's 4 games, and they've got this UGC platform marketplace thing that they're doing. And obviously, I guess that would be an interoperability sort of play in there as well, that you can sort of create stuff that goes across these universes. That's I imagine where their focus would sort of be. But that's quite a lot. So that's always why it was in a sense a sort of surprise that they announced this deal now, because that puts sort of it's good for Yuga because they get the pressures off them, but then now Faraway are sort of like, we've got all this stuff to do, and it's not, it's not like there's a really good idea and it's just been badly implemented. I think it's sort of like a not particularly great idea that's been not very well implemented. So it's sort of a little bit hard to get inspired to know what to do with it. So it would be interesting to see how they manage it. But I wouldn't expect anything soon.
Let's move towards wrapping it up today. So you've been speaking to Sebastian Boget and Nicola Sebastiani from the Sandbox. Yeah. What's your takeaway from the interview there? What's up with the Sandbox?
Yeah, so I've had Sebastian and Nicola on. It was sort of fun. I was a little bit more pushy than I am often in my podcast. I try not to be sort of rude to people, so people don't know.
You've had Sebastian on before.
I know Sebastian very well. So so I was a little bit sort of like, why isn't it out yet, sort of thing. I didn't quite say it like that, but and I think we talk about people complaining. Maybe I'm falling into that trap of being someone who just complains all the time. The Sandbox is a very complicated project. So even if it didn't have blockchain in it, generating a UGC platform, is really complicated. Doing it in blockchain is even more complicated. He was a little bit... I was surprised that I said, has blockchain made it more complicated? Obviously, the answer is yes. He was like, yeah, maybe a little bit, which I thought he would have pushed back more and said, yeah, it made it really complicated. But he didn't. So I just think they're taking it very slowly. They've got tons of funding, so I don't think they're in any rush. They've got their own time frame. I do think, however, that time is... I wouldn't say time is critical for those sort of projects, but I think time is important, and I think they have been a little bit tardy in some of the... I think they could have got some... I think... Because the problem with the Sandbox is at the moment they're sort of running these rotating experiences. So you go into the Sandbox and, you play an experience and then, it's gone and you get a new one. And so there's nothing permanent. And the thing cannot... you need to have permanence for people to, come back in and say, have their friends, and particularly these UGC platforms. Anyone who's played Roblox, it's all pretty much all about your friends. Your friends are there, and they go, let's come to this, this new game, or let's go to this game that we love, or and you're getting these friend requests all the time, and that's really how these things go. And that does take a long time to do, but they don't have that yet because there's nothing permanent. So, I've never developed a game, none of this sort of stuff. So it's very sort of cynical from my point of view. But I just kind of think I feel like there's not a great urgency in there, and maybe not a press point to it, but it could be a little bit like, it's not like Yuga in the sense that the Sandbox knew exactly what they were doing. They were doing one thing and it's just taking them a long time, whereas Yuga got all carried away and all over the place. But I think sometimes it's better to narrow down your focus of what you're doing and get on with it. So we'll see. He says they're in alpha now. He hopes to be beta by the end of the year. The mobile version, which I think is quite important, which he said he didn't think was so important, will come out next year. That'll be the... the mobile thing I think would be pretty important for them in terms of that accessibility. So, but I think it just is. I mean, I fall into the category of just of it's very easy to sort of criticise and say these sort of things. So
good.
Maybe I need to take a step.
On that note, it's time to wrap up. So thank you very much for tuning in, listening to us this week, and we shall see you all next week again. Bye bye.
Bye bye.